We're EarthForce. We are a national nonprofit and the home of Environmental Action Civics. In field chats, you'll hear research-based, actionable tips and inspiring stories of youth-adult partnerships that empower young people to become environmental decision makers. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to Field Chats, Environmental Action Civics Essentials, brought to you by EarthForce. I'm Krysten, Program Manager with EarthForce, and today I'm joined by my two Program Manager colleagues, SJ and Taylor from the EarthForce program team. Hello, hello.
Hi,
We're joined by Haley Valley, who is assisting us with production today. So today we are going to be leaning into the civic and democracy aspects of our work. We'll talk about our environmental action civics approach and how it directly can tie into civic learning and to social studies learning goals along the way. Just last week, I was at the Civic Learning Week National Forum Conference in Philadelphia. And for me, this was kind of a new experience in being in a very civic and social studies centric space. I know Taylor and SJ, you all have spent a little bit more time in that world than I have. I tend to be at the more environmental, educator oriented events. But at this conference at Civic Learning Week, there was a really strong emphasis on this concept of pluralism, which is the idea of having many voices in the room and many ideas to kind of, bridge divides and have consensus that we can come to. And that got me thinking about this idea of interdisciplinarity that we talk about all the time, about how, the EarthForce process can fit into any subject matter, no matter what you're teaching. And so, SJ, you were having this conversation earlier about how those modes of inquiry can differ between those two subjects of social studies and of science, where in a science classroom, the train of inquiry is what is causing this phenomenon, what processes are going on that we can study, how can data explain it, whereas in a social studies lens, we might ask, who made the decisions that created this situation? What are the policies that shape it, the voices that mattered, and what could change, kind of building context around an issue. I had a great time thinking more from a civic lens this week. And SJ, I know you also went to a conference recently. I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, and that sort of inquiry difference between science and social studies has been really fascinating for me as a trained science teacher, and just looking at another way of like historical inquiry and geographical inquiry. It's really great. And I really truly believe like environmental action civics just lays so naturally in the social studies space. And I'm excited to like continue to work in that space. So I was able to go to the National Social Studies Conference. This was in December of 2025, so the end of last year. And something that was really clear to me is that while environmental action civics, we're having young people look at environmental issues, but it's not about like understanding all of the science content around that. The environmental issue is going to make that civic learning visible. And it's a way to, it's like a case study for them to practice their civic participation. So, environmental issues, it was clear to me, like from this conference, right there, it was all over these sessions where we were talking about civic systems, policies, land use, labor, really intersecting race and class, governance, economics. So this is social studies inquiry and civic reasoning. And this idea, this pattern just kept coming up at the conference. And then I'll also just name, this is like something that has come out of about 2 years working with DC public schools, and shout out to Raymond Hamilton for just being such an incredible and patient teacher to me and diving right into social studies. But social studies has come a long way since I was in school, where it's not about memorizing historical facts or geographical content. It's really about 21st century skills. And so if social studies is teaching young people how to take informed action on issues, we just say on environmental issues that they care about, right? And it's like that intersection is just so natural. So yeah, it's been really exciting to see that natural alignment and yeah, I'm excited to share like some case studies about a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll get into your work, SJ, with DC public schools. But Taylor, you've also been working with a district, and we've been thinking at Earth Force a lot about this idea of district integration and kind of system-wide integration. If y'all two want to share both of your examples, Taylor, you're in Denver, and SJ in DC, about how districts and educators can use frameworks. We've talked about the C3 framework, for example, one of many, using that to justify and to structure environmental action civics to get to that district-wide integration.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So with Denver Public Schools, they had a curriculum already that they were piloting, focusing on protest, or the power of protest is what it was called. And it was to teach First Amendment rights as a citizen. And essentially this particular unit really illustrated different movements throughout time. So, like the civil rights movement, LGBTQ movement. And then we came in and were like, oh, well, you also have this environmental movement, and talking and pulling on examples of people utilizing those rights of, speech, assembly, and press, as well as petition. So it's kind of utilizing those things. And so we kind of just pulled in some more environmentally focused resources. So like, oh, what about the land back movement, or all of these other environmental movements that are also led a lot by youth as well. So like providing some of that context. So with that work, it was really taking something that already existed, like they already had a curriculum, and be like, oh, here are ways that EAC can be implemented, because a big part of this course at the end was for students to create a civic action project or a civic action plan based on an issue that they cared about. So that really rings true with the EAC process. And I think with our work, it was really leaning into exploring a variety of topics. And I think that's the strength of the process, as we have environmental topics, but then it can be applied to socioeconomic or political topics that you're interested in impacting or making change about. And so I think with this one, it was really fun to do, because I think a lot of times we talk about action and activism. And with our process, we really highlight a variety of strategies. Like in addition to hosting a protest or organizing in that way, there are other ways to organize, especially even around petition. So that's one thing I've been looking into, especially in Colorado, where young folks, they can't create their own petitions in their local governments. So that is where youth adult partnership has to come into play. So this idea of like, oh, I'm a young person, this is a topic I care about. These are the civic mechanisms that are at my disposal. I can gather, I can write and utilize my voice, and I need some help with my adult allies in my community in order to create a petition. So it's like, oh, I can work with my adult ally, I'll say, it could be a teacher, a mentor, whoever, to create this petition, but I still have the right, I can circulate that petition, and I can get signatures, and I can speak about this. So I think that was one of the fun parts of working with this, is like taking something that already existed and helping them weave through the EAC process to strengthen existing curriculum. Because with that civic action project at the end, really saying, all right, let's do it. So now that you've created this plan, implement it, was kind of what we were also trying to say. Like, not just theoretically in the classroom to be like, oh, I have this plan, how about we do it? And so that was a really fun thing to do as well.
Yeah, I love how like part of that was, so it's like historically learning about protests, right? Like throughout history. So there's that historical thinking. And then what environmental action civics does is it's like, okay, now applying what we've learned about historical issues, because history repeats itself, and like applying those to like current public problems so that they can analyze complex issues and take action, right? And that is actually, like, going back to like our research that supports our work, is like, that is actually what fosters agency, is like applying historical thinking, in this case about the power of protest, and like how that's worked to the here and now. Yeah.
SJ, do you want to tell us a little bit about your work in DC?
Sure. And it's like still going. I'm excited to see what the outcomes are. The teachers will be using the curriculum this May and June. So I'm like excited and nervous to hear feedback, but it's been through so many iterations. So also feeling really confident. So with DC Public School, this is in Washington, DC, and a partnership we had with the Social Studies Department there with Raymond Hamilton, the Director of Social Studies, and his small and mighty department. So students, this is within sixth grade world geography, which is, very different, I think, than the example that Taylor gave. And for a lot of these sixth graders, this is the first time they're also like getting social studies and like really thinking about, okay, what is like the basic skills and knowledge and understanding that we need to teach into with world geography, right? If that's their starting point. So in looking at the sixth grade sort of inquiry arc from the first unit to the last unit, we decided with partners that this last unit can be sort of this culmination of like applying all of their, historical thinking of all of these different places. They're like kind of traveling the world and learning about all of these regions and how economic systems and cultural systems show up, and then bringing it back home. So that idea of think global, act local. And I know at Earthforce, we talk a lot about student voice and choice. And in order to make this curriculum feel really like accessible and just you could pick up and go, we decided to like name a lens. And that lens we decided was going to be urban heat islands. And that is like a social issue. It's an issue you can map and you can overlay maps. It's something you can look historically at green space. And that was just like a really great topic.
Yeah. And SJ, because I've been hearing about all of this from you and have kind of dived into that angle of urban heat islands, like that sounds like science, but tell us about how it's actually social studies.
Yeah. And that was something we were like up against a little bit with the social studies department at first. And I do feel like when Earthforce maybe does approach a social studies teacher or social studies district folks, they're like, you guys are talking about science. And it's like
Earthforce.
Yeah. And so, we are teaching into urban heat islands, but we're really teaching into social studies inquiry. And so young people are answering questions like, why are some neighborhoods hotter than others? How did historical policies shape the landscape of the city? Who makes decisions about trees, zoning, land use, even like looking at environmental justice and environmental racism? What voices have been included or excluded? There's a great lesson where students are looking at tree canopy maps historically and present, and they're looking at redlining maps historically and seeing how that has really changed where the green space is and the decision makers, in urban planning, how they've decided where apartments are going. And you can really see with the heat maps, right? So that's like the third map, how lack of tree canopy is really adding to extreme heat, which as someone who lived in DC for over 10 years, like it's really, really becoming a huge issue, here and now locally, like in everyone's backyard. So we also felt like it was a really good real life, issue that young people are going to want to tackle.
And even SJ, in you describing that, like I'm hearing some of those skills come out. Like earlier in the pod, you said, like the focus more on skill and skill building rather than content. You want to just like pull us home with some of those other skills that were coming out of those?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was pretty cool because in DCPS, there was like they shared this like priority skills cheat sheet. So I was able to like always go and look at that. when I was like building lessons. Is this lesson working on this scale? Is this lesson working on the scale? And at first it was like, oh gosh, how are we adapting this process, our process? And then I realized it really, like, I need to stop working so hard. Like, it is such a natural fit. So young people were practicing geographic systems thinking, looking at patterns of human settlement and environment, how different systems shape local places, and then that, like, how those local actions affect and connect to global systems. Of course, sourcing, that's a really big piece for social studies, and it's just simply like, who created this map or policy? Like, what perspective does it represent? Contextualization. So what historical conditions might have produced present day environmental conditions, or high rates of asthma, and like connecting to the lived folks' like lived experience. And then corroboration. So that one comes up really in like our step 3, but like looking at multiple sources and human beings being one of those sources and themselves to develop a claim. So it might be, like we talk about complex texts being maps. They can be articles, they can be photographs, and they can be interviews with folks, right? And environmental data, like, so they're actually are going outside and collecting some like surface temperature. That's really the only like science they have to know for this. And so we're working with some of the science teachers to help our social studies teachers feel a little bit more confident in that. And then finally, like, using that corroboration to development and argument a claim about the cause of urban heat islands and those disparities. So yeah, it's really like hitting all of the skills that were prioritized, at least in DC this year, that I know connect to C3 as well.
It is really cool to hear you talk through those. And like, often when we're teaching the Earth Force process, we always emphasize that it is about skill building. And it's really cool to hear you like go through those one by one and how they were illustrated in real life in DC public schools.
Yeah, translate the EAC vocabulary over to social studies, right? Like, we're all actually just talking about the same thing, was like what I realized. Like, yeah, our EAC roadmap in the social studies like teaching tool, I'm like, oh wow, like, this is great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for walking us through that. That's been today's pod. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, let us know what you think over at earthforce.org/podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, y'all.